All right, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Another day at the shop, and of course, working on our Civic. Kind of low-key running out of things to do to this. It might be time to start ordering some parts, but you know, we've had some things in the works to add a secondary channel car, sell the CB7 Accord, and buy a new daily, but something that's fun and cool for the channel. I have really been intrigued by 8th Gen SIs lately, especially the 4-doors. I think 8th Gens go hard. They got the good K20 with the RBC intake manifold, couple bolt-ons, K-tuner, make it look good, fitment good, nice wheel tire. I think it'd be a pretty sweet daily, but nothing's cheap, nothing comes free, especially in this market. Seems like any Honda that is somewhat cool with a good K series or a good B series swap, pricing is mad. So we're still tinkering on this. If you guys remember last week's video, we tightened the steering rack and it came out dialed. Today, I kind of want to adjust the clutch pedal. There's two things way out of adjustment on this car. One of them was the steering rack, and now we can actually turn our steering wheel and have input in the actual tires before an inch or two of play side to side. Not only that, the second thing is the clutch pedal. When I had the B18 in it, it had that clutch sitting on the floor with a lightweight flywheel. That clutch is a stage 4 6-putt clutch with a lightweight flywheel. And it was really weird feeling engagement, so I adjusted the clutch pedal and I kind of adjusted it way wrong. Now when the clutch is all the way on the floor, you have to let it back out more than half of its throw before it engages. It doesn't engage till the very top, and obviously it's supposed to engage a couple inches off the floor. You're just supposed to have a little bit of dead play before it hooks and you let out. So I definitely need to replace that. We've literally been driving it for years with the clutch feeling like that, and every time I drive this car and I chuck my foot on the clutch and go to start it, I'm like, wow, this is god awful. So today I think we are going to crawl in there and adjust it. It's been something I'm kind of putting off because it's really hard for my giant ass to squeeze under the dash to adjust the clutch, but I would like to adjust it. And who knows, I might take it up and down the alley and kind of test the steering and how the new clutch feels. Not new clutch, but new clutch adjustment. Make sure it's fully engaging and not actually half slipping when it's fully let out. But regardless, enough blabber. Let's jump in to today's video and adjust this clutch. First things first, this needs to get angled over more because I need to crawl way under the driver's side dash, so we need the front end over there. So let's try and maneuver this rig out of the way. I need the keys. Oh, I forgot how tight our steering wheel is now. That feels good. All right, and now that the car is positioned, I can actually open the door. We gotta crawl way under here, and I don't know how well you guys are gonna fit in there because just me by myself, I hardly fit in there. So let's see what we can do. All right, going in. Let's see what you guys can see here. Okay, so it's hard for me under here too, but basically, you have this little hook right here, and there is a pin that goes through it. You need to take the cotter pin out, punch the pin out, and then see on the back side of this, there is a lock nut. Back off the lock nut a few turns, thread this fork in a few turns, and then see how the clutch pedal feels there. Right now, that's the play we have in it. As you can see where it's moving at the top there with this bolt, that's your stopper. You should have about ½ inch of dead play, just like we do here. But if we push the clutch in, it's really strange feeling engagement because when you push it in, there's like really no dead play at the bottom, and that's kind of what we need to adjust today. And I remember adjusting this a lot when we had that stage 4 clutch. So I'm just gonna go re-through it again today and see if I can't make that feel any better. but we're gonna see here. I also don't see a neutral safety switch up there, which is why it can start in gear. Not ideal, but what are you gonna do? First things first, gotta remove this cotter pin. And I actually, whoops, there goes my mic. I actually put it on the wrong side now that I'm here looking at it. But there's the cotter pin. Don't put this on the wrong side like I did. The cotter pin should be on this side, not this side. So keep that in mind. I love these little mics because I can just basically attach them to anything I want. And it's sick. But now with that out, we gotta take this pin out, which looks like that right there. Cotter pin goes through that, obviously. And then this should kind of slip away from it. Mine looks like it's all the way loosened off, so we're gonna be threading this in a little bit more to get more engagement off the floor. Basically, the more that this is tightened in towards the firewall, the closer your clutch will engage from lifting the pedal off the floor. Whoops. Careful you don't hit your pedal because it won't come back right now. But right now we have it backed off all the way off towards the driver. So there's a nut behind it we want to break loose, thread it in a couple turns, bottom this shiny piece with the ears on the nut that we just tightened a few turns, rehook up the pedal, and there should only be like an inch of dead play. So you might have to adjust this bolt up here. That's kind of like the limiter, the stopping bolt. And that has a lock nut on it as well. So right now, I'm just gonna get the wrench in there and try to spin that off a turn or two. Maybe it's already loose enough to do it by hand. Yeah, it is. The problem I'm running into is that the clutch is in the way to really spin this anymore. I'm just gonna have to crawl under here and then show you guys kind of when it's done, I think.
2,000 years later.
All right, boys, so let me show you what I've done here. As we can see, I have got this backed off now, but the problem with me was that I couldn't get this fork to tighten because it was still around the actual clutch pedal. So this bolt up here, that's the stopper. So I had to fully loosen it so I could actually get this fork to be able to tighten a bit. And I'm gonna tighten it about 4 or 5 turns. I'm going to go ahead, put this pin back in it, and then kind of just see how it feels by hand. I'm not gonna like solidify anything or tighten the clutch pedal stopper. We'll get to that later, but I'm just gonna go ahead, reinstall the pin and push it with my hand because I've had this car for years. I've driven it for a long time. I'll be able to feel by hand if it's any better or if we need to go more or less. We might also have to take this car up and down the back alley. The snow's melted a bit. It's still a little bit gross and freezing cold out there, but just to be able to test the pedal. It's really hard for a giant like me to get under here as well. So I've backed it off about 4 turns. I was really concerned. I'm like, am I gonna have to take the master out? Because I could not get that fork. It was sitting over the actual clutch pedal and I could not get it off even when the stopper on the top was all the way loosened off. So I had to like pull it down at kind of a sketchy angle, but I ended up getting it. So like I said, let's go ahead and put this pin in. I'll pick the camera back up and we'll kind of see if these adjustments made sense. All right, so I'm gonna make sure I put it on the right side this time. I'm actually gonna go ahead and if I can, tighten it another couple turns. Okay, have to go on the back side, get this pin put back in. All right, so now as we can see, we have a ton of dead play. That's because we have to adjust the stopper. There should be about a 1/2 inch of dead play, but not almost 3 inches. But regardless, now that the pin's back in, and this is super easy adjustment. You literally can thread it down with your hands. There is a lock nut on it, but you can just thread it down to get the proper spec. Right there is about all you want, 1/2 inch. So that actually does feel quite a lot better actually. I think I'm gonna have to test it. See, I can tell that's dead space and then it engages right there. Actually, I think we might be bang on with that. So I'm just gonna go ahead, put the cotter pin and all that back in. I adjusted the stopper already, so we have a little bit of room. And then I think we're pretty damn close, honestly. Let me get this dang cotter pin back in there. All right, cotter pin's back in there. It feels like a good amount of play. I might do it up just a hair. And then we got to go ahead, tighten the lock nut. But we also are just testing, so I'm not gonna fully solidify anything just yet. Get that little bit snugged up there. Yeah, that feels a lot better, but we need to see if it actually is better. Let me get the hell out of here. Ugh. Ugh. God dang. These little kid cars ain't made for the big dogs. God, it's hard to fit in there, especially when you get a fixed mount, big ass Recaro seat with a lot of bolstering that doesn't slide back any further. God damn it. All right, now at the start of this video, I did mention, I may have not mentioned, but I'm gonna do it now, that you needed some pliers for the cotter pin. Oh, if only yours is seized. I mean, I did mine with my fingers, no big deal. And a 12 millimeter. The 12 millimeter is responsible for the nut on the back of the fork coming off the master cylinder. Now that I'm talking about it, that reminds me I gotta crawl under there and tighten that. But that's a 12 mil. You're also going to need to set the amount of I guess stop at the top, because you don't want a ton of dead play after your clutch is let out. And the stopper bolt and lock nut are 14 millimeters. So a 12 mil, a 14, and potentially some needle nose for the cotter pin. You're all set, baby. It's a 3-tool job. This time, unlike last week's video, you don't need any specialty tools. God, I just took my 12 mil back and was about to put it back in my dang toolbox. Remember, tighten that, but we need to see if this adjustment worked or not. So I think I'm gonna have to take her up and down the back alley to really be able to tell, but I'm gonna keep my 14 millimeter out, put everything away, and let's see if my clutch A still engages, B hopefully it doesn't slip, and C hopefully it fully disengages. We about to find out when we put this thing in gear, aren't we? But only one way to find out, baby. First and foremost here, let's just hop in, see what it feels like with the foot, you know what I'm saying? Feels very, like, oddly linear. It definitely feels strange. Maybe we'll just have to drive it. All right, let's jump back out of this thing. Come over here, probably put the front bumper back on. There's no need for it to be off. But let's connect power. We need these because we have to go move the Accord. So let's go get that moved and then we can test this clutch pedal out. Back in the old Accord. Good unit, but how sick would it be to build an 8th gen and daily it for the channel? Do you imagine the POV drives we would be able to do if we had a freaking 8th gen SI? God, I'm like dark. Could you imagine the freaking POV drives we'd be able to do if we had an 8th gen SI at home every day instead of having to plan a whole day just to take a car for a drive? I love the Civic, but god damn, I'd be lying if I was saying it wasn't a bit of a freaking chore to take that freaking sucker out. But yeah, how sick would that be to freaking daily a goddamn 8th gen? The amount of POV driving footage I'd be able to get would be utterly insane. I'm gonna put the damn camera down. All right, that should be bloody mint, but like I was saying, just having a daily that's also a cool car, so much nicer. get me inside. It ain't that snowy, but whew, boy, is it cold out there still, god dang. Okay, well, I guess let's test this clutch pedal out. To be honest, it felt better with my hand than it did with my foot. So hopefully she's good to go. I mean, it was like fully backed off, so has to be better, right? It has to be. Now, I do want to say, not only is this the first feel for the clutch being adjusted and first test drive to feel the new steering wheel input, and obviously like I'm not hitting boost, going to a back road or doing anything nuts today, but no traction bar on it anymore, which I'm really curious to see if this thing can pull headfirst into the garage, because there's a concrete lip and without my ramps, this thing couldn't go in. It would just go nose into concrete. So with that traction bar off, I'm hoping I can pull into the garage once again without hitting the damn concrete. We'll find out, won't we? Front bumper is done up, taken care of. I'm gonna switch from the big cam to the iPhone so I can get some in-car footage, and you bet your butt we're getting a freaking cold start on this rig. I'll do that with this camera. Okay boys, taking it off my head, putting it right next to the exhaust. There it is. Let's get a cold start. Gotta open this up too. I really hate this. It's too cold outside for this. I gotta let my damn heat out. Ah, my mic's not on my head. I'll be back. Hopefully it's recording. Let's feel this clutch. Goes into gear better. Oh, it's better. Clutch feels way better, bro. Oh, I just backed out of the f***ing garage and it didn't f***ing hit anything. Holy shit. Okay, I'm gonna let this thing warm up a little bit. Guys, the clutch feels way the better. It actually does what it's supposed to do. And the steering wheel feels tight. Hallelujah. Oh. Steering wheel's a little bindy. Steering wheel just bound a little bit.
Really?
I don't know if I like that. Okay, everything's feeling all right so far. The clutch adjustment is dialed. This thing's dialed, boys. Let's go for a bit of a drive. This thing ain't got no gas in it. I know what's wrong with it. It ain't got no gas in it. First POV drive, or not really POV, but first drive with the mic. I'm still curious to see how the exhaust sounds, but no gas, letting the clutch out. I'll do it with my fingers too. This is bottomed out, this is fully let out. Has a pretty good bite point. I'd say that's about 2 inches off the floor. Before it was a lot more. Yeah, and you can tell that the clutch is fully let out before you actually let the clutch all the way out, which is exactly what a guy's after. I haven't driven this thing in months, boys, you gotta keep in mind. Also, the steering feels way more direct and precise. I don't have to double clutch going from reverse into first anymore, and the steering wheel feels dialed. Like, this is all movement. I feel zero dead play, like zero. it feels dialed, honestly. The steering wheel input is probably the most noticeable thing. It's dialed, and I think we nailed the clutch adjustment right off the rip. Wow, this thing's dialed as can be. Yeah, so with this clutch adjustment, before it used to let off, like you'd let it off the floor and the clutch would go like halfway out before it engages. Now you let it off the floor and it goes out like a quarter before it engages, but you can tell that the clutch fully engages before it's all the way at the top again. So I think this adjustment is dialed. We had it all the way backed off the rod and I threaded it on probably 4 or 5 full threads and it just feels dialed now. Before, if I was in reverse, I would have to double clutch to go into first, or going from first into reverse, I would have to double clutch. Now I just push the clutch in, it's in neutral, goes right into reverse, still on the clutch, haven't let it out, right into first. I mean, how can you complain with that? Steering feels dialed. Oh, this car, dude, it wants to rip. Damn, it feels good, boys. Sorry we're not doing more of a rip with you, but it's freezing out, the roads are gross, it's wet. I just really don't want to get this car disgusting. Now here comes the real test. Can I come in without it hitting? This is the real test, if I can drive in the garage without it hitting. Oh my God, I can drive in the garage again without having to use ramps. That stinking traction bar. Oh, scrape the mid pipe. Holy shit. Boys. Let's go. Let me switch back to the big camera here. Well, boys, I gotta say, I'm really pleased that we aced that in one freaking shot. I am not even kidding you guys. This thing is perfect. As you know, I've owned a lot of manual vehicles and I have come to learn the bite point and engagement on the clutches. For me, the best way I can describe it to you guys is how I describe most things, is in quarter increments. So before I adjusted this clutch, you would have to let the clutch out halfway off the floor, in between off the floor and fully let out, about halfway before the clutch would engage. So you're working with the top half of the clutch pedal throw before it engages. That's way too much dead space off the floor. Now in my Veloster N, my SCR spec Vs, the B16 and B17 I think, or B whatever, my 2 SCR spec Vs, my boosted Integra, I've owned a lot of cars, and all of those clutches, when you push the clutch to the floor, they only come off about a quarter before the clutch engages. So dead space from the floor, let off the clutch about a quarter, and then you have that half where it's engaging, and then the last quarter where the clutch is fully engaged is also just dead play. And the adjustment on the clutch pedal stopper also was perfect. There's just that little, about ½ inch of dead space at the very top of it. And now it feels just like the Veloster, just like my Integra, just like my Sentras. Now I can finally let my clutch out, and it only comes off the floor like a quarter of the way of the throw before it engages. And then before I take my foot fully off of it, you can tell the clutch is fully engaged because it has that other quarter of dead space at the top. I literally winged that. I literally threaded it 4 or 5 threads on. I'm like, I hope it's good. If it's not, I'm gonna have to crawl back under there. Just like the steering rack, we did it probably 4 times before we got it dialed. This one and done. I'm gonna crawl under there. I'm gonna cinch up the lock nut for the stopper and the lock nut on the fork and twist the cotter pin just that little bit more. But it feels dialed, man. Like, if this is your clutch throw, dead space, engagement, out, dead space. Like, it's literally dialed. It's so perfect. And I figured I couldn't be doing anything wrong by this adjustment because there's only a certain amount of threads off the master cylinder, and it was literally at the end of the threads. There was like no more threads on the fork. So it was fully maxed out, hence why it had about half of the throw of dead space off the floor. Now, like, it literally felt like my clutch was on its last legs, but I've done burnouts in this thing. I've dumped the clutch a million times. I've romped through gears on this thing. It's a 1.6 liter that's supposed to make like 120 horse, and it makes 300 on this clutch. and it hasn't burnt. I haven't smelt clutch. It hasn't slipped. It hasn't done anything. So I don't think this clutch is bad at all. This clutch is actually perfectly fine. With a proper in-spec adjustment, and yes, Honda in the Chilton book and Haynes manual, you can find exact proper specs, but I don't actually know what clutch is in this. Could be stock, could be an OE replacement, could be a little bit of an aftermarket clutch. I know for a fact it's not going to be anything too aggressive, but I don't know. What I do know is that there's a lot of life left and it handles 300 horse completely fine, but now it has proper throw. When I first got in and the car was turned off, it felt good with my hand, but then when I started using my foot, I was like, this doesn't feel quite right. But I can assure you that this clutch adjustment is absolutely A1 now. It feels amazing. Just like every other car. I really don't know why I waited 5 freaking years to adjust the clutch. It's like, this is my weekend warrior, hence why I want to get rid of the CB7 Accord and get an 8th gen SI, so I can daily something fun and make more POV drive content instead of having to plan a day off from work to just simply take this car out and enjoy it. You know what I mean? Obviously, when I do take this car out this year, I'm always going to film it in POV drive. I'm gonna get an action camera so it can sit on my head. The in-car footage you've seen there is not like POV to me. That's just like kind of like a car vlog angle. I want it to be right on my head, full POV. So I'm gonna get an action cam for that. And every time we take this car out, we are gonna do a POV drive, but I would love, love, love to just finally get another fun car for the daily, second build for you guys, and just do so much more driving content. One last thing I gotta touch on, you guessed it, last week's video. If you haven't seen it, go up in the corner. I can never remember what corner. Maybe this one, maybe this one. It should have been popped up by now. But last week's video, we did a sort of how-to video on adjusting the power steering rack in this car. And that also turned out A1. I didn't take it out last weekend because it was actually snowing and my whole back alley was white and had a couple inches of snow. This thing with these Nittos, I don't know about you, but I know for a fact this sucker ain't moving an inch in any bit of snow. But we didn't get to try it last week, and we did get to try it right now while we were trying out the clutch. And let me tell you something. The steering is freaking dialed. You probably heard me in the car, but when you're actually moving, it doesn't feel like there's any dead play. I got one bind when I was pulling out in front of the shop here. I got one bind. You guys saw that on video. But no other binds. At one end of the alley, I did a really tight, like 2-3 point turn, full lock to full lock, no bind. Other end of the alley, I reversed full lock, turned out full lock, no bind. Pulled back in here to the shop, which is also a tight turn because we have kind of like a steep embankment, so you got to hit it at a harsh angle and then crank it back to get in. Regardless, I'm over explaining, but the steering adjustment feels amazing. One bind, nothing else to write home about except for the fact that it feels dialed. When you're driving, every input you make on the wheel makes an input in the actual car and the tires, and it feels way more direct. And that clutch pedal finally feels dialed. So that's 2 things, such easy adjustments. One requires very simple 3 tools, 2 wrenches and maybe pliers, which we did today. The other requires 1 wrench and 1 specialty wrench, but it's a 40 millimeter. You can buy a different 40 mil wrench. You can make your own tool to do it. You don't need the specialty tool. So 2 super easy adjustments that completely transform the way that this car feels. From the clutch feel with my leg, from the steering wheel feel with my arms and my hands, this car feels that much more dialed now that those 2 very, very simple things have been adjusted. So if you're like me and procrastinate car chores, I like to call it, those adjustments, maintenance and things, just do it. Super simple job, and the outcome of it just made the driving experience of this car that much better. Just do it. Adjust your damn clutch pedal if you need to. Don't if you don't need to. And adjust your damn steering rack, especially if you're like me and went power steering to manual steering, because the world of a difference I'm going to have in the feeling of driving this car this year is immense. And I am so stoked that we were able to get those 2 things dialed out. And now that those 2 things are dialed out, that's mainly everything on the chore list for this car. Still has fresh spark plugs. It still has fresh oil. Turbo kit is dialed. I don't really have any parts. We're gonna have to get creative with some content for now, but I keep hinting the 8th gen, and there is a reason for that. So buckle up, hold on. I have a lot of big things coming in life for this year that kind of take precedence over this. I'm not gonna get into that. Leave that aside. But 8th gen, Remember that, okay? That's all I'm gonna say. Till next week, boys. Comment, like, subscribe, and let me know if this video or last week's video helped you get a better driving experience out of your 90s Honda, because I know I wish I didn't put it off this long now that I've done it, because the way that this thing feels from the clutch to the steering, it's night and day. You wouldn't think these minor adjustments would do much. It does a ton. Do it. Get your car chores done, get your maintenance done, and we'll catch you next week, boys. Peace out.